So now the scones have just finished, and we're going to put them onto a tray, and we're going to serve them with clotted cream, a little bit of jam, and butter if you like as well. And of course you can, if you want smaller scones, it's so easy, you just use a smaller cutter. And it's less cooking time as well, so it's perfect. But what we're going to do right now is we'll put the scones off to the side, and I'll show you them again after, once we're finished. And we're going to get on to the salmon dish. So the salmon dish is using several different components. We're going to use, for this case, we're going to use salmon trout. Because we're in Sardinia, and there are no real major lakes or rivers or freshwater bodies in Sardinia, there's only smaller rivers, we find salmon trout is a lot easier to find. And this seems to be the season where it seems to be quite plentiful. So I'm using salmon trout in case of the salmon. Also, just so we can watch, I've cooked some potatoes. Now these are pomme fondant. Now pomme fondant, they take probably about an hour to cook. So I've done it, or an hour and a half to cook. So you have to shape the potatoes in little rounds, carve a little edge on the top of the potato. We saute them, and then I've cooked them. I've actually covered them in vegetable stock and some herbs and quite a bit of butter, because it absorbs all of the butter and absorbs all of the liquids. And we cook them until the liquid is just evaporated, which is just done. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop them in the oven. The oven is now off, just so that they stay nice and warm for the dish. Also, being in Sardinia, we don't have actually a whole variety of fancy vegetables. In the middle of Sardinia, you don't really find any baby vegetables. You don't find all sorts of different micro herbs, but what you do find is some amazing, wonderful produce just grown here locally. So it really is a zero footprint. So because of this, the season now, we find a lot of wild asparagus. And so we've picked some wild asparagus, and we're going to use that in the dish, and just carrots and zucchini, which you find quite plentiful here all the time as well. And also now is a season where you find some nice fresh peas. And so another reason I was telling you about the fact that we don't have any baby vegetables is just I've turned all of the vegetables by hand, just to give them a little bit more shape, and it's just nicer to present, I think. Quite classical, I know, but it's in this area, it's a wonderful thing to do. So we're going to cook the carrots first. I've got some salted water boiling away here, and we're just going to blanch them. The zucchinis can go in later. But while the carrots are cooking away, we're going to start to make the sauce. And we're going to start with just cutting some shallots, very fine. Try not to cut your fingers, of course. We're going to do a horizontal cut just to make them even a little bit finer. And we're going to cut them into a brunoise shape. And this is going to be used in the base of our sauce. So the shallots, we have to cook them slowly. And we cook them for quite a long time, actually. The slower you cook them till they're translucent, and it actually gives them a certain amount of sweetness. If you don't cook them long enough, it gets an oniony taste. It's quite bitter. But the longer you cook them, the sweeter they get, strangely enough. So we're going to get our pan. Just this tiny little pan. We're going to add a little bit of olive oil. In Sardinia, there's heaps of olive oil around. And we're going to gently cook the shallots. So while the shallots are cooking, we're just going to zest a lime. Being careful only to use the green of the skin and not the white. The green will give it a wonderful citrus flavor. As soon as you start getting the white, it becomes quite bitter again. So you just have to be a little bit careful here. So I love these microplanes. They do a great job, but unfortunately it's just a little bit large. So we're just going to cut it a little bit finer. And that's going to be used in the sauce as well. We'll cut the lime in half. And we'll just pay attention that we don't burn the shallots. We want to make sure, or try to make sure that they don't brown at all. We want to keep them nice and translucent. So we're going to just cook them very slowly over a fairly low heat. Until they get nice and translucent. So the salmon itself. So I've deboned and I've skinned the salmon. You have to be very careful. There's a row of bones that run right down the spine of the salmon, and I've picked those out all with tiny little tweezers. We're trying to keep, with these pieces we're going to keep nice and small because they're going to cook very fast. And we try to keep the sizes quite even. So there's quite a bit of a fleshy part, but the belly is quite thin. So you have to just be a little bit careful when you're doing it, that you don't get uneven thicknesses of salmon, because it will cook at a different temperature. So by now, the carrots have cooked for a little while. We're going to add the zucchini. And again, the zucchini, I've just turned with a little tiny turning knife. And we've just shaped them, just to give them a little bit more of a classic look. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to add the asparagus, because it cooks very quickly. So we're just going to season the salmon a little bit. The pan is heating up right now. A little bit of salt. Season both sides. Put a little bit of lime on there, just for some flavor. And then we'll wait until the pan comes up to temperature, and we're going to seal them off. We'll keep an eye on our sauce. The onions have become nice and translucent by now. So now we're going to add a little bit of white wine. And some lime. The lime that we used also for the zest. And that'll just give it a nice citrus flavor. Also, while that's reducing, we should have a bay leaf. So we're just going to add a bay leaf. This is just found here locally around the area. So also, this is also the time for peas. It seems to be quite the season for petit pois. So I thought we'd also do a little bit of petit pois and put that in the dish. So we're going to blanch it. There's already salt in the water. We're just going to cook it quite quickly. Bring it up to the boil, strain it, and then we're going to puree it. And that's going to be the puree on our dish. At the same time, we're just going to add the zest. Now it's just a matter of waiting for the peas to come up to the boil, the liquid for the sauce just to reduce, and once it's done we're going to incorporate some butter. Just very gently incorporate the butter into it. So with the peas, I'm just going to puree them afterwards. So we'll need a blender and just a container to puree it in. So as the liquid reduces down and the wine is dissolving, I just always add just a tiny bit of cream. And this cream is going to help just to bind the butter and the sauce and just hold it. You can do it without. But then the sauce is a little bit more, it's easier that it can split. So the cream just gives it a little bit more body and just stops it from splitting. So if you have a dinner party and you're not quite sure how long the speeches might go on or the talking might go on before the main course, sometimes it's better, I find, just to add a little bit of cream. It holds the sauce and you're wary that it's not going to split on you. So the peas have just come up to the boil. We're going to strain them, leaving just a little bit of water. I'll pop them in this container. And then we're going to puree them. Because these are quite young peas, the skins on the peas themselves are quite soft. And so it's really good for a puree. The older the peas or the larger they are, they tend to get quite a thick skin on them. And then you have to pass it through a sieve just so you don't get those little bits. Perfect. So now we have the pea puree. The carrots and the zucchinis are almost ready. We're going to just wait a couple more seconds for the sauce to reduce down just a little bit more. As a matter of fact, just to speed it up a little bit, I might just transfer it into this pan just to help it out. And it'll reduce down a lot quicker. For the salmon themselves, it's not going to take long at all. The important thing for the salmon, I find, is that it's very pink still inside. If you overcook the salmon, if it's cooked all the way through, it tends to be a little bit dry. And salmon trout especially so. In New Zealand, there's some great products. The king salmon, of course. And when I was working in Belgium for the New Zealand ambassador, we got a product from New Zealand, and every time we used it, it was called Ora King salmon. And it is an amazing product. The fat content in the salmon is quite high, and we used to cook it using a sous vide method. And the sous vide method is when you put the salmon, we cut it into the different portions that you need, and then you put it into a vacuum packed bag. The vacuum packed bag then gets immersed into water, and the water is the exact temperature that the salmon should be cooked. So if it's 52 degrees, it will stay only cooked very slowly for half an hour to an hour, till it reaches 52 degrees. And the beauty of that type of cooking is that the salmon is completely pink and it's the same color all the way through. Whereas say if you're cooking it in a pan, the pan is quite hot. And so you always get a little bit of, not overcooked, but the quality is a little bit different. The outside you get is just a little bit more white, and the inside is also still perfectly cooked, but it's not quite as the same as when you cook it by the sous vide method. So we want to try and make sure we just put a little bit of olive oil into the pan again. The salmon has been seasoned, and we're putting it into the pan at quite a high temperature, and we're just going to cook it quite quickly. So everything will happen quite quickly now at once. So we're going to put the asparagus in. As you can see, the sauce is almost reduced down, So we're gonna quickly turn off the fire, or at least turn it right down, and we're gonna add the butter. So we're gonna whisk in the butter nice and slowly and incorporate it. You have to make sure that you don't bring it back to the boil again. If you bring the sauce back to the boil once you add the butter, it will split. You also have to make sure the butter is quite cold so it incorporates quite slowly into it. You have to just constantly whisk. The salmon itself should be a nice light brown on one side. We're going to turn it over. And just to finish it off, just to give it a buttery flavor, because salmon trout actually doesn't have a very high fat content, I'm just going to add a little bit of butter into the pan as well, and it's just going to baste it. We're going to keep adding butter to our sauce. Baste the salmon a little bit. We'll actually turn that off now because that'll be done. The vegetables we're now going to strain. We're going to add just a little bit of butter into that pan as well, just to give them a nice glaze. And it just gives them a shiny look. So the salmon we can remove from the pan. We're going to put them on a tissue just to absorb any oil that might be left. And the vegetables are ready. Turn off all the pans. The sauce, as you can see, the butter has been completely incorporated and it hasn't split. And then again, we're just going to strain that off. Just to get those little bits of shallots and make sure it's a nice smooth consistency. Just push any of the remaining sauce through. So we're just going to give it a little taste. So we're just going to give it a little bit more salt, and I think it's ready. Now for the plates themselves. Again, we're going to use gloves just for the plating up. And this is for twofold. We're going to pop the plates in the oven. Just for a couple of seconds, just to warm them up. And this will just make sure that the food doesn't go out cold. So we're wearing gloves for two reasons. Obviously the hygiene reason, but also if we wear gloves as we're cooking and as we're plating up, we don't put any fingerprints on the plates themselves. So I actually made a little bit more of this liquid before, the peas, just before, and I've put it into a bottle because it's a little bit difficult to put into the bottle by itself. It takes a little bit of time, so I've just done it just ahead of time. So you can see we've made the pea mixture, and this is the same, but just in a bottle. So I thought for today, actually, I would do two different styles of plates. One is going to be a little bit more traditional, and one is possibly a little bit more modern. We'll make sure the plates are spotless. And we'll start. Just some herbs that I picked before. And again, unfortunately, we don't have any fancy micro herbs here in Sardinia, but what we do have are just natural. We have a lot of fennel, some parsley, a lot of rocket, so it's good. So this is the pea mixture that we made. Take some of our asparagus, and we're going to put that in the middle of the plate. And again, this is wild asparagus that you find here locally, that we picked this morning. The potatoes, we'll just put in the middle, and possibly for this one time, I'm just going to cut into one, and you'll see why in a second. The vegetables themselves, we'll scatter. The salmon on top. And then just a little bit of sauce over the top. And just to finish off, just this morning I made just a little bit of a garnish that we're going to use just for the salmon. And it can sit just a little bit in the potato and just over the top. Some small herbs. And that's the first dish. For the traditional, well, let's say a little bit more traditional, we use the pea mixture that we made today. We're going to put it into a form, just so you get a nice round form. The salmon we'll place on top. And the vegetables we're just going to place around the plate. again the sauce. A few little herbs. And then lastly, just for decoration, we'll finish it off with a garnish and the potatoes. So those are the two salmon dishes that I've done for you today. As you can see, there's two different styles. But also, lastly, we'll bring back the scones. So that's the dishes. Thank you very much.